This week on The Record, taxes, trains, and bus lanes. Why a transit dispute at City Hall could hit your pocketbook. And a sheriff on trial. Alfred Montgomery in federal custody and in chains, fighting to keep his job. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Last week we closed the show with the death of the penny. This week we start even smaller, just half a cent. That's how much St. Louis shoppers have paid in sales taxes for 8 years running, all part of a promise to pay for better transit. It was back in 2017, voters approved a 0.5% sales tax to fund the nearly $1 billion Metrolink Green Line. The light rail project would have connected North and South City, but since then, the city's tax collector has only raked in about $96 million, about a fraction of the revenue needed to pay for that. Mayor Kara Spencer has paused the expense side of that ledger almost immediately after taking office, saying it would cost too much.
I'm looking to make sure that we have viability. When you're looking at a $1 billion project and you've got a funding stream of about $12 million a year to pay for it, you've got to have that federal matching dollar in place to be able to make it viable. On top of it, you've got to be able to account for maintenance and the ongoing operations of it.
Perhaps a cheaper, faster mode of transit might start even sooner. In September, Bi-State Development scrapped those plans for the Green Line altogether, turning its focus instead to a new plan, the Bus Rapid Transit Project. The estimated price tag here, less than half of what light rail might have cost. But in order to do all that, Board of Alderman President Megan Green wants voters to green light it once again. Mayor Kara Spencer reacting to that idea Thursday at City Hall.
I was really disappointed to see the president of the board unilaterally, without communicating with Bi-State or other partners, introduce that bill yesterday, because coordination and collaboration and communication with the public is just so vital to making sure that we have a project that not only gets us the federal funding, but has the partnership with the public so that we can serve the greatest good.
Board of Alderman President Megan Green joins us now on The Record. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Give our viewers an idea what the problem is you're trying to solve. Why put this question back to voters a second time?
So when voters initially approved this back in 2017, we asked them specifically to fund North-South Metrolink light rail. We're changing direction with this, and I agree with changing direction on it, given the escalating costs. But we owe it to voters to go back to them and ask their permission, not just to pivot on the project, but to also make sure that the funds, almost $100 million in funds that have been raised so far, we get their approval to pivot that to Bus Rapid Transit too.
And what happens if voters, feeling the pressure of prices, decide not to continue paying an extra 0.5 cent at the cash register?
I mean, I think that's something that we're going to have to, figure out as a city if that happens, but I don't think it will. It passed overwhelmingly previously when we were looking at light rail, and I think if, the mayor and myself and Bi-State and the aldermen all champion this together, I think it very easily passes at the ballot box.
It's an interesting question. I wonder if we take a closer look at the ballot language from 2017. I have it here. Shall the city of St. Louis impose a sales tax? And it says for a number of different things, including North-South Metrolink, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And number 5, to upgrade the city's infrastructure. Yeah. Would you agree that bus lanes are infrastructure?
They are. The problem arises, though, when you look at the actual exhibits and fiscal note attached to that. It says that 60% of the funds collected must go into that North-South Metrolink fund. And so in order to reallocate that to an overall infrastructure fund, we really need to go back to voters.
So you seem convinced that this language that voters passed is null and void. If the North-South Metrolink project is dead, so is the authorization to spend the money.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I thought all of us had a common understanding on that until last week. I mean, all of my previous conversations with Bi-State had been under the understanding that this was going to have to go back to a ballot, and it's the safest way to make sure that we protect these funds for the public.
This goes back on the ballot if you get your bill through the Board of Aldermen. At the same time, roughly, you'd be asking voters to reauthorize the earnings tax. 1% of their income, 0.5 cent on all their sales taxes.
Yeah.
What is the pressure that you think most Americans, most St. Louisans are feeling when it comes to prices in 2025 and 26?
It's definitely affordability. And I think what you'll see when we have this debate in committee is a decision about whether this does belong on an April ballot or whether we want to put it on an August ballot or a different ballot, so we're not weighing these issues at the same time. But the fact of the matter is,
for it at the same time.
we are paying for it. This tax is continuing to collect regardless of whether.
I guess my question is, does that affordability crisis make one or both of these tax levy questions more difficult to pass in this environment?
I mean, I think that voters in our city have been feeling the crunch for a while. And last time the earnings tax was on the ballot, it passed overwhelmingly. I think we've been really good as a city of coming out and championing these things and making it clear that it is a third of our operating budget for the city, and that if it were to go away, you would see a decrease in city services and police and fire response and all these things that people care about. And I think most city residents know that.
This isn't the first. So, okay, how do you you just kind of laid it out there, how you might overcome the campaign. You're going to say it's worth it. What does that pitch look like? Why is rapid bus transit worth it?
It's more cost effective. Rather than $1.1 billion for a 9-mile stretch of light rail, we're looking at around $400 million for one bus rapid transit route, which would allow us to actually do multiple routes over time. It's much more cost effective. It's something we could do faster and improve public transit for residents in our city much faster than the maybe 10 years we would be waiting to get a north-south Metrolink line in.
10 years is a long time to wait for the train to show up, and
Exactly.
It's also a little bit hard to pick up and move railroad ties once they're installed. You can move bus routes.
Correct.
Okay, interesting to see how that debate unfolds. This is not the first time that you and Mayor Spencer have had different ideas for the direction or the way the city should move forward. You heard her comments there where she said she was disappointed. Has there been any other blowback that's affected you in the way, your relationship with the mayor after your bill here?
Honestly, most folks, whether it's alder people or people from the public I've talked to, assume that this had to go back to the ballot because they saw that it pivoted from what we sold to voters back in 2017. And, to me, I think we should never be disappointed when it comes to having to go back and check in with our voters and have that conversation with them and ask them to, validate the change in direction or the vision that we have for the city.
You called for a similar proposal in replacing the sheriff. Now, we don't know if he's permanently expelled yet at this moment, but if that moment comes, why should the city have a special election as opposed to sticking with the interim appointed sheriff?
Well, it's not really a question of whether we should or not. This is state law. State law says that if the election for sheriff is more than 6 months after the vacancy, that the Board of Aldermen basically has to set an election within 10 weeks. So we really don't have an option but to call a special election.
And Sheriff Alfred Montgomery hasn't even fulfilled his first year of 4 in
Correct.
that first term. You endorsed him.
I did.
In his primary, his Democratic primary against Vernon Betts. I think maybe, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't know if you were super pleased with the former Sheriff Betts. What went wrong? Did you notice a change in Alfred Montgomery after he was elected?
I mean, I did, unfortunately. I was really hopeful that we had this young, enthusiastic, kind of up-and-coming former sheriff's deputy who could step into the role and maybe bring some new vision. And we obviously had a lot of problems with the previous sheriff. And so, I took a bet hoping that it couldn't get worse, and unfortunately it did.
You took a bet against Betts.
I did take a bet against Betts.
Do you regret that endorsement now, or how will it change the way you think about endorsements going forward in your own vetting?
Yeah, I've talked about that with my team, and I think we're getting ready to put together a more thorough application process, vetting process for folks that seek our endorsement. And I don't want one bad endorsement to sully other folks that we get behind in the future.
One other political question on this political program. You've endorsed Cori Bush for Congress in the past.
I have.
Can we assume you're going to be doing so again?
Yes.
Why will she win this time?
I think that there's a lot more understanding about the big money that went behind her opponent last time around. And I also think that the common opinion about the war in Gaza has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years. And so I anticipate that folks in our region are going to want somebody who's really focused on St. Louis and is not serving the interests of a foreign government.
President Megan Green, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We saw jarring images this week, a sheriff in chains as a trial to remove him from office takes place. What's happening in that trial and the testimony we heard in court next? Welcome back. This is day 3 of St. Louis Sheriff Alfred Montgomery's trial in his fight to keep his job. The sheriff facing 6 serious allegations in a charge brought by Missouri's Attorney General, Catherine Hanaway, prosecuting this case now. Those charges include illegally detaining Deputy Jail Commissioner Tammy Ross, violating her civil rights, illegally arresting and disarming a lawfully licensed private security guard, a former deputy of the Sheriff's Department, failing to transport detainees at the City Justice Center for medical treatment, using taxpayer-funded vehicles for personal use, mismanaging finances, and then while in jail, failing to devote his time to his duties as sheriff. The trial started Wednesday with the sheriff shackled at the hands and feet as the state started to make its case to remove him. We were in the courtroom that day, hearing testimony from Tammy Ross, who Montgomery had handcuffed in February. That video playing in court, Ross said she did not want to give Montgomery access to a victim of sexual assault who was detained in the Justice Center and made that complaint. She refused to let him in at the time. Montgomery's lawyers said that incident came after multiple requests were made to access the jail. Then Thursday, former acting jail commissioner Doug Burris told the judge that when Montgomery refused to transport detainees for medical care, it made the jail significantly more dangerous, conditions inside deteriorating. Then one of Montgomery's highest ranking commanders said he was punished and retaliated against after he warned the sheriff not to put Ross in those handcuffs. Another chief deputy said he too was stripped of his badge and gun, demoted and retaliated against after he sat for a deposition with the state and participated in a federal investigation. That same deputy testifying under oath that Montgomery stripped the hospital unit from 18 positions down to just 8, making work more dangerous and less safe, both for deputies and for nurses tasked with caring for those prisoners in medical facilities. Thursday afternoon, the Attorney General's office played secret tape recordings of Montgomery on a phone call saying that deputy has, quote, got to go, driving at the very heart of the criminal charges Montgomery faces in federal court. His defense attorneys arguing he was merely venting in that phone call, not making direct threats to the deputy in question. The trial expected to last well into next week. We'll be in the courtroom bringing you all the latest updates in that trial. You can tune in for free on the 5 Plus app tonight for 5 on Your Side at 4, 5, and 6 for all the latest updates. We're back in a moment. Welcome back, 5 on Your Side political analyst Anita Mannion, one of our greatest, most prolific guests on this program, joining us. It's good to have you back, Anita.
Great to be here.
Especially because the longest shutdown in American history just concluded in the last few days. It lasted for more than a month, and a lot of our viewers are looking for some insight and analysis. Maybe you can tell us. What do you make of what Democrats were able to negotiate in this deal to reopen the government, and how do you assess their tactics and how effective that strategy was?
Well, you know, for a long time, it seemed like they were really hanging together and being effective and really making healthcare the issue. And I think in that they did elevate the issue of healthcare. It's on Americans' radar, and especially if you get the ACA now, you just saw your premiums go way up. So I think in that aspect, their messaging was effective. But ultimately, Trump's gamble that they would cave when people started feeling the pressure was right. And so 8 Democrats joined the Republicans to end the shutdown. And basically what the Democrats got was an agreement that there will be a vote in the Senate on the Affordable Care Act subsidies. But that doesn't mean there'll be a vote in the House. So that might not go anywhere, likely won't go anywhere.
Democrats basically won the concession that they have something to run on.
Right.
But they didn't get any real policy change.
So in a way, I would say that the Republicans won the battle, but maybe the Democrats win the war if something doesn't happen on healthcare and they use that for the midterm elections.
You talked about the messaging. Did you see anything interesting about that block of 8 Democrats who joined with Republicans to break through the shutdown?
None of them are up for election next year. So 2, including Illinois' Dick Durbin, are retiring, and the other 6 don't have elections till 28 or 30. So they are at lower risk than folks who are up for election next year.
If we get into the weeds a little bit, I wonder how this impacts Democratic primary voters, because we did hear from a lot of voters, viewers, even other elected officials in Illinois, Tammy Duckworth, all the different field of candidates running to replace Dick Durbin, who said he should have fought harder.
Yep.
It's almost as though they feel frustrated. A lot of teams, 4th and 37 and late in the fourth quarter, you know, they wouldn't be prone to go for it. They would punt, as these Democrats did. But we heard a lot of Democrats in the stands saying, no, go for it.
That's right. We're hearing from a lot of elected officials and definitely a lot of just regular folks who are very frustrated. And that's one reason when you see the Democrats' polling numbers are low, a lot of it is because their own members are frustrated.
Do you think that we'll see, because this deal to fund the government doesn't last all that long?
That's right.
How likely is it that we're right back here all
So
over
January 30th is the next deadline.
Yeah.
So the only things that are guaranteed beyond that are the Veterans Administration, SNAP, WIC,
So Democrats
and
have
Congress.
almost taken those things off the table.
That's right. So that was part of their negotiation. They also negotiated that federal workers would get back pay and that those reductions in force, those layoffs, would be retracted.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit to the political fight coming ahead in 2026 for control of Congress in the midterms, because we saw that big map war. The first skirmish to start the map war was in Texas. Republicans gerrymandered there. They tried to add 5 new Republican-leaning districts. The federal court this week said, nope, can't do it. How does that change the game here?
Yeah, it's interesting because California kind of said they were doing this to retaliate for Texas, and now California's measure passed, and Texas seems to be stymied for now. You know they're challenging this to the Supreme Court. That's right. And we've seen in Indiana Republicans saying they're not going to change this. It's being challenged in Missouri. So
Kansas declined to do it.
That's right. And so President Trump is doing something really, we use this word so much, but unprecedented, to kind of encourage states to redistrict mid-decade. And it might not work as much as he thought it would.
It's interesting to see that, and in the middle of it, Missouri has already changed their maps, and in the middle of it, the Attorney General Catherine Hanaway has argued something interesting in court. Perhaps there's a broader strategy that all these different states and their cases will come to the Supreme Court, and in that mix of different case folders, there'll be this one argument sticking out in Missouri that the congressional district here in St. Louis is unfairly made up to protect racial minorities, I think she argues. I hope that's a fair assessment of her argument there. What did you make of that strategy, and how do you see that affecting the Supreme Court's rationale, given what we've seen them decide when it comes to affirmative action or other civil rights era precedent?
And the Supreme Court has been in some ways dismantling the Voting Rights Act, some of these protections. So we've seen this going back about 10 years. And so I don't think it's a bad gamble to try that strategy. There's another case in front of the court that's similar. What the kind of rule is now is you can redistrict, gerrymander based on partisan preferences, but not racial. And sometimes that gets murky because people of color are often Democrats. And so drawing those districts, they might argue, well, it was partisan, not racial.
Mm-hmm. Something to watch for carefully.
Yes, and by the way, there's so many lawsuits in this situation on both sides. I feel like everyone's just throwing everything to see what sticks.
Okay, I want to ask you about this other dynamic that we saw on Capitol Hill just the last week, because for a long time, President Donald Trump has loudly and vociferously opposed the idea of releasing all the Epstein files. Until when? When do you think was the turning point for him?
Well, you know, there were basically 4 Republicans that were standing against Trump in this, and they were real Trump loyalists, the 3 women, but they really took a stand on this. 2 of them came out and said they were sexual assault survivors, so this was personal and important to them.
Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace.
That's right. And so of those 4, he publicly has attacked Macy, the male, really attacks, Marjorie Taylor Greene, called Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room. So it was putting a lot of pressure on these folks, but they held steady. And the final straw was, now that the House is back in session, the final House vote to do that discharge position was there. And so the House was going to vote on this. These folks weren't caving. And so ultimately Trump decided to go ahead and kind of, this is going to happen, you might as well endorse it.
He'd already lost, why not just go ahead and surrender and
That's
stop
right.
fighting it? It's going to be interesting to see how that, do you see that shaping 2026 at all, that vote or the issue, what we learned from it?
I think it kind of depends what comes out and what the aftermath is. You know, it could hurt Democrats, it could hurt Republicans. We don't know what's going to come out of those files.
All right, Anita Mannion, it's been a little while. Real quick, just on local politics, you watching the sheriff's trial at all? Do you have any quick instant reaction to what's just going on in the city of St. Louis right now?
Oh my gosh, well, everything with Mr. Montgomery is interesting, isn't it?
Gives us a lot to write about.
It does. I mean, from golden dice to delayed trials to trying to be a sheriff from prison. So I don't know. I think that's going to be an interesting trial to watch. We already know so many crazy anecdotes. I wonder what more will come out.
Yeah, it makes a lot of us wonder at home, could we keep getting our paycheck if we were trying to work remotely from behind bars? I'm guessing not.
Right.
I'm guessing our employer would say no. Anita Mannion, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
We check the record in just a moment when we come back. They say find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, when I started pursuing a career in TV, I heard one veteran actually say you should be willing to pay to do the work. Not many people really want it that bad, but one guy I know did. Let's check the record. 31 years ago, a slightly younger John Anderson paid his own way to attend a special training for TV graphics in Atlanta, all for a chance to get a part-time gig here at KSDK. It was 1994. He's the guy there in the hat and the headset. It was the early days of the Clinton administration. 2 years later, this station brought him on full time, and he's done great work ever since. For 3+ decades, John has worked behind the scenes, to make KSDK the legacy station it is. And for the last 3 years, he's the engineer who's directed this show. This one will be his last. No, he didn't know we'd have the camera trained on him. I'm guessing he's not loving it. But as he prepares for his stellar run at KSDK to fade to black, I just wanted you, our viewers, to know, for the record, if you ever liked anything in this program, it had a whole lot to do with John Anderson. We're going to miss you, John. Love you. Thanks. That's our show. Until next time, we're off the record.